राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। जय प्रभुपादा प्रभुपादा प्रभुपादा, जय प्रभुपादा। जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद, जय जय प्रभुपाद।
विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्री श्रीमद् हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की ताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम, Canto 1, Chapter 9, Text 15. यत्र धर्मसुतो राजा गदा पाणिर्वृकोदरः, कृष्णोऽस्त्रिगाण्डिवं चापम् सुहृत् कृष्णस्ततो विपत्। यत्र धर्मसुतो राजा गदा पाणिर्वृकोदरः, कृष्णोऽस्त्रिगाण्डिवं चापम् सुहृत्कृष्णस्ततो विपत् यत्र धर्मसुतो राजा गदापाणिर्वृकोदरः कृष्णोऽस्त्रिगाण्डीवं चापं सुहृत्कृष्णस्ततो विपत् धर्मसुतो राजा गदापाणिर्वृकोदरः कृष्णोऽस्त्रिगाण्डीवं चापं सुहृत्कृष्णस्ततो विपत् यत्र धर्मसुतो राजा गदापाणिर्वृकोदरः कृष्णोऽस्त्रिगाण्डीवं चापं सुहृत्कृष्णस्ततो विपत् यत्र धर्मसुतो राजा गदापाणिर्वृकोदरः कृष्णोऽस्त्रिगाण्डीवं चापं सुहृत्कृष्णस्ततो विपत् वैष्णवीस् वृकोदरः कृष्णोऽस्त्रिगाण्डीवं चापं कृष्णस्ततो विपत् यत्र where there is Dharmasutaha, the son of Dharmaraj, Raja, the king, Gadapanihi, with his mighty club in hand, Vrukodaraha, Bhim, Krishnaha, Arjun, Astri, carrier of the weapon, Gandivam, Gandiv, Chapam, bow, Suhrut, well-wisher, Krishna, Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, Tataha, thereof, Vipat, reverse. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time. It is irreversible. Otherwise, how can there be reverses in the presence of King Yudhishthir, the son of the demigod controlling religion, Bhima, the great fighter with a club, the great bowman Arjuna with his mighty weapon Gandiva, and above all, the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas. As far as the material or spiritual resources were required, there was no scarcity in the case of the Pandavas. Materially, they were well equipped because two great warriors, namely Bhima and Arjuna, were there. Spiritually, the king himself was a symbol of religion. And above all of them, the personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, was personally concerned with their affairs as the well-wisher. And yet, there were so many reverses on the side of the Pandavas. Despite the power of pious acts, the power of personalities, the power of expert management, and the power of weapons under the direct supervision of Lord Krishna, the Pandavas suffered so many practical reverses, which can only be explained as due to the influence of Kala, inevitable time. Kala is identical with the Lord himself, and therefore the influence of Kala indicates the inexplicable wish of the Lord himself. There is nothing to be lamented when a matter is beyond the control of any human being. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshitarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So today morning we are continuing our discussion on the topic of when bad things happen to good people, how to face adversity, how to grow through pain. It's a 3-part series. In yesterday's session I talked about when we turn toward philosophy, how is philosophy to be approached. So I talked about 3 main points: the purpose, person and position. The purpose of philosophy is to essentially help us make sense of the things that don't normally make sense. And for that purpose, we look not just in one sense for rational sense. Okay, I want a logical explanation, but things also need to make emotional sense. And then when philosophy is being talked about or is being used, who is the person using it? What is their nature? What is their character? What is their agenda? That has to be considered. The purpose of philosophy should be to elevate people, not to manipulate people. We talked about how Hiranyakashipu weaponized philosophy to think that the immortality of the soul can be used to acquire power over many lifetimes so that he could punish God with the death sentence. So then lastly we discussed about the position. Where is a person? What are they thinking? If a person is already afflicted, then the person needs to be comforted and elevated. And if a person is feeling very complacent, then they may have to be shown that they are wrong and they need to work on fixing things. So the philosophy should help the person grow. So today we will talk about the second part here, that how do we make sense. So the purpose of philosophy is to help make logical, rational and emotional sense. And here in this particular verse is the most graphic example of where philosophy, specifically in this context, the philosophy of karma, it makes no sense. Why does it make no sense over here? Because all the characters here are virtuous, and how virtuous they are is being indicated over here. Yatra dharma suto raja, that Yudhishthir was so virtuous as to be the son of Dharmaraj. Generally speaking, life is always difficult. And when life is difficult, see, there are problems in life. And for facing problems, we have 2 resources, broadly we can say. Well, one resource is our strength or skill in this life. We need that, isn't it? That's resource 1. So, in this world there are people who may cheat us, and we have to be intelligent enough to understand who is not trustworthy, and therefore we don't maybe invest money in Ponzi schemes or whatever. So we have to have a basic level of strength or skill to do well. But beyond that, resource 2, we could say, is piety, is punya. Now we can say, of course, the strength and skill has also come from our past punya. But there is some punya which comes during the course of our life and gives us positive results. So there is the piety which helps us in less visible ways, we can say. So now, beyond that, we could say the resource 3 could be God's mercy. Now, of course, you can say that God's mercy is the source of everything, is the source of our skills and the source of our piety. That is true ultimately, but still, we could consider this as slightly different. So specifically, we could put this as 3 concentric circles. One is that our skill in this life. Now we could say strength is also a skill. So that is mentioned over here in terms of Arjuna being extremely expert in Gandiva, Bhima being expert in terms of his physical strength as well as his skill in mace fighting. So we need skill. Then beyond that, we need piety or pious credits. So, and beyond that, we need God's mercy. So, God's mercy can be said to be the source of everything else, and our piety can be said to be the source of our present skills. But still, the skills are something which are more tangible for us. Now, in one sense, piety and skill, both of these can be considered material. Punya it's invisible, it's adrushta, but still it is considered bhautika, it is considered prakritika, it's material. Now, God's mercy is ultimately spiritual. And these 3 are broad resources with which we can face problems in life. And for somebody whom all 3 work together, then that person gains success, broadly speaking. Say after India recently won the World Cup, the T20 World Cup, the Indian captain said that it was destiny. It was the blessing of God. Basically, now if we consider that many of the Indian players are quite talented among the world's players, not just because we are Indians we like them, but they are very talented players. But it's just talent or skill alone is not enough for winning. There are other factors which also come in. And those factors are the adrushta factors. Those are invisible factors. And those factors also need to work in our favor. Then we get the results. So now, Bhishma is trying to help Yudhishthir make sense of the situation. Make sense how Yudhishthir is afflicted with a sense of guilt. He is feeling that I did something so terrible. I caused the war and I caused the bloodshed resulting from the war. But Bhishma is expanding his perspective. He said that bad things were done to you again and again and again. And eventually, as a result of the unrelenting atrocities that were done to you, you were left with no option except to do a bad thing. Sometimes the nature of the world is that we just have no good choice. Somebody may say, I don't want to fight. Okay, I don't want to get into physical violence. I don't even want to get into arguments with people. That's good, we don't want to argue. But if a person is falsely accusing us once, twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times, then sooner or later we may have to stand up for ourselves. We may have to get into an argument. Now we shouldn't be looking for an argument. There are some people who are like that. Some people who are just looking for a reason to argue. That's not healthy. But at the same time, if our only principle in relationships is I don't want to argue with anyone, well, And the nature of the world is people will walk over us, people will trample us, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. So we need to stand up for ourselves sometime or the other. So basically in relationships we can say that people can be in interactions, or when we interact with others, we can be aggressive. Aggressive means we're just looking for an argument. This is a result of rajas. But we can also be passive. Passive means that is a result of tamas. We just don't do anything. We just feel sorry for ourselves, we are resentful, but we don't do anything at all. In between is that we need to be assertive. And that is a matter of sattva. See, sometimes tolerance can be very easily misunderstood. That Krishna tells Arjuna, Tam stitikshasva bharata. But what is Krishna saying or implying by saying tolerate? Does Krishna imply, oh, the Kauravas have done so many atrocities towards you, just tolerate them and live with it? That is not the tolerance that Krishna is calling Arjuna for. Krishna, the tolerance being called for is, it is difficult for you to fight against Bhishma and Drona. Arjuna has just said 10 verses earlier, Katham Bhishma maham sankhe dronam cha madhusudana. He says, how can I fight against Bhishma and Drona? Ishu vipatiyotsami pujarha varisudana. He says, I should be offering them flowers and respect, not shooting arrows at them. So that's 2.4 and 2.14. Just 10 verses later Krishna is telling, this is the difficult duty that you have to tolerate. So sometimes doing bad things happening to us has to be tolerated, and sometimes we needing to do bad things has to be tolerated. Now most of us are ready to tolerate the second thing. I'll do bad things and I'll justify it in the name of God. No, that's not the point here. Sometimes hard decisions are required in life, and so bad things doesn't necessarily mean immoral or illegal. I'm using bad things here in the sense that things which we may not be comfortable doing, things which we don't feel good doing. So we need to tolerate and do those things, even if it sometimes means hurting someone. We don't want to go about hurting others. So basically, here, what is generally one aspect of philosophy, when I said philosophy helps us to make sense of things that don't make sense. So how does philosophy do that? It does it by expanding our vision. See a bigger picture. So for example, if you consider the philosophy of karma, it is, okay, I am saying this person is such a good person, why so many bad things happening to this person? Okay, expand our vision. That, okay, this person is on a journey, they also lived in the previous life and they did something in the previous life, and that could be a result of that. So expanding the vision can be, like if we talk in terms of, it can be lengthening the vision, it can be deepening the vision, it can be broadening the vision. Normally when we expand, there are 3 dimensions: length, breadth and width or depth, whatever you want to use the word in this context. So philosophy is meant to expand our vision in various ways. So in this case what is happening is, Yudhishthir's vision is, oh, you know, he's almost thinking like, my desire, and then it led to the bloodshed. Therefore, I am guilty. It was my desire specifically for the kingdom that led to the bloodshed. This is his vision. But what is Bhishma doing? Bhishma is expanding his vision and is saying that how, if we consider a bigger picture, there were series of atrocities done to you. Now it's very interesting, throughout this whole analysis, Bhishma does not even once mention how terrible Duryodhan was. That wicked Duryodhan, he had tried to disrobe Draupadi. He deserved what came upon him. He's not going in that direction. And it's significant that even in the Bhagavad Gita, not even once does Krishna mention about the atrocities done by the Kauravas. Many people have a little bit in the West, people have a bit of not just aversion but paranoia, great fear towards any religious text that seems to call for violence. Any religious text, and they feel, okay, Muslims have their Quran and they have the idea of a holy war, and Hindus have the Bhagavad Gita and that also calls for war. And they draw a false moral equivalence between the two. Now the point is, yes, after the Bhagavad Gita was spoken, a war does occur. But the primary purpose of the Bhagavad Gita was not just to get Arjuna to fight. If that had been the purpose, Krishna could have just described the incident of the disrobing of Draupadi, and that would have been enough to get Arjuna's blood to boil, and Arjuna would have pounced on the Kauravas and destroyed them. But Krishna does not take that tack at all in the Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because the Gita's purpose is not so much to give circumstantial reasons for fighting. They are terrible people, therefore they need to be punished. It is more for universal principles for decision making. How should we act in life? So Bhishma is also taking the same point. Whenever any philosophical discussion happens, it is not based on circumstantial reasons, circumstantial analysis. So circumstantial reasons for fighting or not fighting. That is not the purpose of the Gita, and that is also not the tack which is being taken by Bhishma. It is more universal principles for decision making. How are we to make decisions in our life? That is the principle that is being taught here in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavatam also. So he does talk about, how virtuous you are, so that he can build on the point that actually what happened was terrible for you. And in this purport, which actually anticipates the next verse, he says this is just the result of time. Now, Kala is considered to be a factor which leads to a lot of consequences. Now, is Kala an independent factor? Prabhupada says that Kala is not different from the Lord. Manyetvam kalam ishanam anadinidhanam vibhu. Just in the previous chapter, in 1.8.28, Kunti Maharani has, while praying to Krishna, said that, I understand that you are time. Manyetvam kalam ishanam. So then, if Krishna is time, then can we say that it is Krishna causing these things? So that is what we will be discussing today. So first I analyzed how, when problems come, we have three resources. That is our will, that is our skill rather. Then there is our past piety. And then beyond that, there is God's mercy. So based on these three factors, when some disaster or distress comes upon us, now there are three broad factors in this. There is God's will, there is free will, and there is evil. So God's will, free will, and evil. Now, in the Abrahamic religions, evil refers to the being called Satan, who is evil and makes people do evil things. In our tradition, there is no conception of anything like Satan. But so it is Evil refers to the samskaras, the impressions that are there within either us or others, which make people do bad things, even almost against their conscious will or their better intelligence or whatever. I'll explain this gradually. So when something bad happens in our life, it is important that we analyze carefully what is the cause of this suffering. And say if I put my hand in fire, if I am not attentive, say I am sitting in a place which is very cold, and that's why some kind of traditional setting where the fire has been put nearby to put heat, and then I don't pay due attention, I just move my hand and the hand goes toward the fire and my hand gets burnt. Now, is that burning due to God's will? Well, no, it's my present action. Say if on a cold night somebody eats a dozen ice creams, and then the next morning they'll say, ice cream. They'll feel like screaming, their throat will be so sore. Now if they got a terrible throat, is that because of their past karma? Well, yes, past night's karma, not past life's karma, isn't it? So basically, when things happen, it is important that we don't take one statement in isolation. So for example, there's a statement that our happiness and distress are determined by destiny. Yes, that is definitely true. But then scripture also tells us that yehi samsparsha bhoga dukkha yaunayayavati. The more we indulge in sense pleasure, the more we suffer. So what does that mean? If somebody drinks a lot and they have a terrible hangover, a splitting headache, and they become dysfunctional, was that misery made by destiny? No, it was by their decision to drink too much, isn't it? So, can our present actions increase our distress? If destiny has fixed happiness and distress, then does it mean even if a person does terrible things, there will be no increase in suffering because of their terrible actions? No, actions do have consequences, isn't it? So, if our present actions can increase our distress, then happiness and distress are a duality. And can our present actions not increase our happiness? For example, another point is Sattvam Sukhe Sanjayati. The Bhagavatam says that through Sattva Guna, happiness comes. So if somebody consciously cultivates a sattvic lifestyle in this life, and maybe they were eating very spicy food, very oily food, very unhealthy food, and they start following a sattvic diet, and their body feels fitter, they feel lighter, overall they feel better. So was that happiness destined? Does that mean that our habits in this life are worthless? Are good habits of no use? It's not that simple. So for example, I'll give, these are called not contradictions but paradoxes. Paradoxes means apparent contradictions. And the thing which I am trying to do over here is that we are trying to understand the complexity of reality. So, three paradoxes, I'll give an example. First is, destiny determines happiness and distress which are fixed. That's one statement. But the opposite is that sense indulgence, sense gratification leads to distress. Sattva Guna brings happiness. So this is a different statement. So does that mean that the Rajoguna, Tamoguna or Sattvaguna choice in our lifetime will make no difference? Another thing which you could say, that our lifespan is fixed. Specifically people say a number of breaths are fixed. That is one statement. But then in contrast we have Ayurveda. Now the very meaning of Ayurveda is the Veda, the knowledge that will increase our Ayu. If our lifespan is fixed, then how can our lifespan be increased? And how can the same tradition which has said that our lifespan is fixed also give rise to a systematic body of knowledge that states that whose express purpose is to increase our lifespan? So this is the second point. Now third point if we consider is that not a blade of grass moves without the will of God. Now there is this Gita Sar which is put in many places, which says, one sentence there is, जो हुआ वो अच्छा हुआ, जो हो रहा है वो अच्छा हो रहा है, जो होने वाला है वो भी अच्छा ही होगा. Whatever happened was good, whatever is happening is good, whatever will happen will be good. Now, I have read the Gita over a dozen times, recited it over 100 times. I have friends who have recited Gita more than 1,000 times. But none of us have ever been able to find any verse that comes close to this. That whatever happens is good. It's not a philosophically correct statement nor the textually correct statement. Because the Gita's focus is not on whether what is happening is good or not. The Gita's focus is on whether what we are doing is good or not. Arjuna wants to know, Pruchhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha. That Pruchha, I want to know what is the right thing to do. So one statement is, God controls everything. God plans everything. God controls that everything that happens is good because ostensibly it is God's plan. Now versus, now God controls everything, we might say something like 9-10, Maya Adhyakshena Prakriti. Everything happens under my supervision. But then, the same Krishna in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita very categorically declares, Na datte kasyachit papam na chaiva sukrutam vibho ajnane navrutam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. So Prabhupada is also very categorical in explaining this verse. This is in the 5th chapter. The 5th chapter, verses 11 to 15 are very relevant to what we are discussing here. But let's look at this particular verse. It's the 15th verse. Na datte, adatte means to accept. Kasyachit papam. Krishna says that I don't accept. Na chaiva sukrutam vibho. When people do good, people do bad. That is their own doing. Ajnane navrutam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. So, God controls everything. There are people's misdeeds, people's wrongdoings are not God's doings. People's wrongdoings are not God's doings. That means, say, sometimes we say everything that happens is actually done by God. Well, that is an oversimplification. Why? They consider the disrobing of Draupadi. Now, Krishna intervened to protect Draupadi at that time. But if we say Krishna is the doer of everything, then was it Krishna who through Dushasan was disrobing Draupadi? It's a horrendous thing to even consider. That was not Krishna's doing, that was Dushasan's doing. So now Krishna allowed it to happen. And we'll discuss why he allowed it to happen. But the point over here is that there are times in this world when, so we go back to these three things. There is, so to say that everything is done by God, that is a misunderstanding. And if everything is not done by God, that the bad things are done by bad people, then we can't say that the bad things are good. Bad things are bad. So there is a key difference between saying that everything that happens is good and is for good. It is, everything that happens need not be good, but it can be for good. That means good can come out of whatever bad has happened in the world. Now that bad may have happened because of free will, that means we ourselves made some mistake, or it can be because of evil, that some bad person did some terrible thing, and because of that had something happened. So for example, say when the whole gambling match happened, we could say, is Yudhishthira responsible? Well, yes, at one level. The Mahabharata does not idealize characters. The Mahabharata gives a very realistic picture of characters. Now in the Bhagavatam, there is often the focus on the Leela explanation, that everything is ultimately the Leela of the Lord. Parikshit Maharaj was cursed because that was the plan of the Lord, so that the Bhagavatam could be spoken. And that is true, definitely. So Yudhishthira Maharaj gambled so that ultimately how Krishna protects his devotees could be demonstrated. So everybody was orchestrated at that time. The way Yudhishthira acted, the way Bhishma acted, all of them acted in such a way that ultimately this particular principle of how Krishna protects his devotees can be demonstrated. Now is that a valid explanation? Of course it's a valid explanation. As I said yesterday, I discussed, there can be, and I won't have time to go into all this, but the pastimes of the Lord can be approached at 4 different levels. There's a literal level. This is based on Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this. No, he doesn't use the acronym, but he talks about Chaitanya Shikshamrit. There's a literal level, there is an ethical level, there's an allegorical level, and there is a devotional level. So the devotional level is where we look at the Leela. Oh, this is all the Lord's arrangement to fulfill his purpose, which is of course true. But at an ethical level, we need to consider motivations and situations. At an ethical level, we consider, okay, this person was in this situation and this person did like this. Okay, what were they thinking when they did something like this? Was their thinking right? If I had been in that situation, would I also been pressured to do something similar? So the point is that there's an ethical perspective also to be considered. And from the ethical perspective, we could say that Yudhishthira did make a mistake. Now Yudhishthira himself says that initially when he started gambling, it was completely out of a intention to respect the instruction of his elders. That Dhritarashtra was like a father figure for him, and Dhritarashtra had called him to gamble through another father figure, Vidura. So initially, so if we say Yudhishthira's motives for gambling, if we consider, now this is, if we carefully read the Mahabharata itself, it happens. Initially, it was deference. Deference means basically respectfulness, deference, obedience. Oh, my elders have told me to do it, my seniors have told me to do it, so I'll do it. It started with that. But after some time, it became despair. It was not despair that I want to win, it was not greed. But right in the beginning only he had told Duryodhana, why do you want to steal from me the wealth that is meant for the service of the Brahmanas? He didn't want wealth for his own enjoyment, he wanted to do service with that wealth. But then as that wealth was being taken away from him one by one, then he started becoming desperate. I have to take care of my family, I have to take care of the kingdom, I have to serve the Brahmanas. I need to have something. Even if one round I win, now I'll have something. But so later on, when talking with Draupadi, Yudhishthir, it is his humility that he acknowledges that I got carried away at that time. So it was not greed, it was not addiction, it was a terrible situation that came. And now is Yudhishthir at fault? Well, of course Yudhishthir is at fault. We can't say that he is not at fault. But is Yudhishthir the only one at fault? Of course not. There's a whole scheme. The whole match was rigged, first of all. Now Yudhishthir playing against Shakuni. It's like a street batsman playing against an international fast bowler. The chances of winning are right from the beginning not there. Or it's like a street kid who is just learning boxing having to play a boxing match against Mike Tyson. Someone like that who's an international champion. It was right from the beginning, it was rigged. So when it was rigged, and the rigging was done by people who were evil. So it was Duryodhana who was evil, and Dhritarashtra who was like a puppet for him. So if you consider in terms of villains, Duryodhana is the active villain and Dhritarashtra is the passive villain. So both of them together did something. So let this terrible thing happen. Now did Krishna allow it to happen? Yes. Without Krishna's sanction, upadrashta anumanta cha. Without Krishna allowing it, nothing would have happened. But did Krishna make Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra come up with the gambling plan? No. That was their own evil. So the disastrous gambling match. If we consider, we are trying to understand how things happen in this world. The disastrous gambling match, was it due to Yudhishthir's free will? Yes, definitely. Was it due to Duryodhana's evil? Yes, definitely. Isn't it? Is it ultimately Krishna's will? In the sense that the will means here more of permission. Yes, it is Krishna's will also. So now the point here is that depending on what perspective we are taking. Now, when we analyze situations, we need to analyze and find out what is the actionable cause over here. That which is the cause I want to act on at this particular time. Do I want to act on the cause, oh, it was my mistake and I need to learn and improve? Or it is this evil person doing this and I have to fight against this evil person. It is God's will, God allowed it to happen, so I accept it. So here, we'll talk about these three factors and how these three factors, when we consider which factor, different courses of action will need to be taken, and those we'll be discussing in tomorrow's session. But right now, I'll make one last point. I'll talk about the role of Kala. Because what does Kala mean actually here in this context? That there is time as a factor. So earlier, I discussed the statement about destiny being fixed. Or rather, destiny fixing our happiness and distress. And yet, does that mean our present actions don't have any consequence at all? No, it doesn't mean like that. I'll explain how this works in two terms. So, destiny, and we are talking about destiny and Kala, their relationship. But in terms of our actions, that is our free will. And in terms of others' actions, which I will summarize here as evil. Now that does not mean that our actions can never be evil. And it doesn't mean the other actions are always evil. I'm just simplifying it over here. Our actions means here we can say the Pandavas, for example. And others are Kauravas over here. So, let's take a simple example and then we'll move to a more historical, the Mahabharata example. Say suppose, now say when we begin our life journey, so we all carry some Daiva. Daiva is basically like the accumulation of our past karma. Say assuming, right now let's focus on the negatives because we are talking about distress that is going to come in our lives. Say suppose somebody has minus 400. You cannot quantify karma like that, but just for our purposes, that means there are 400 units of negative karma that a person has. And say based on that, if this is their life, during that time, they are going to have 4 adversities that they are going to face. Maybe one adversity could be they suddenly fired from their job. Another adversity is maybe they are cheated by some relative with finances. Maybe another adversity is that they lose some loved one. Another adversity is that they get some terrible disease. They have an accident or a disease. So assume that these 4 big problems are going to come in their lives. Now when these problems come, it's very difficult to deal with these problems. But imagine if these 4 problems come all nearly at the same time. Isn't it? It's like we lose our job and we have invested some money in a stock market and we find that in stock, that whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. At that same time, say, we get some cancer and at that same time, our life partner divorces us and goes away. If all 4 come at the same time, it would be unbearable. Isn't it? So, it's our own karma coming to us, but when it comes to us can make a significant difference. Now suppose say, in this life, I am going to have, we all have some karma which is going to come to us. But suppose somebody learns to be polite and courteous and helpful in their relationships. Then what may happen is, even if one person abandons them and goes away, they have cultivated relationships because of which others will be there to help them. Suppose somebody has learned financial responsibility. That means it is that they earn money and they spend it all. And they often spend more than they would earn. Now that is they may be earning a lot, but they are spending more than what they earn and they are financially irresponsible. Then what happens? They will be in big trouble if they lose their job or if their investment goes off. But if they learn financial responsibility. So either I am talking of courteous behavior or financial responsibility. These are basically characteristics of Sattva Guna. Then what may happen is that, they may lose the money, they may lose their job, they may lose their savings, they lose their investment, but they have cultivated a habit, so they will have some. So if they are financially responsible, they won't put all their money in one place in the hope of getting big gains. They will diversify. That's common sense, you could say. It's intelligence, it's common sense. It's Sattva Guna. So on the other hand, say suppose somebody is supposed to get some cancer. Now they get that cancer. But if throughout their life they have eaten in a regulated way, they have practiced good habits like exercise or health, then they will have good immunity, relatively speaking. And their chances of battling with the cancer will be better. So, the point is that even if our past karma is fixed, but Kala will play a significant role in how that karma unfolds in our life. So, that means whenever that karma is going to come, that is a bad kal for us. So now sometimes astrologers may, your Shani is here and your Mangal is here and all those things. Now the way we sometimes speak it, it's as if Shani or Mangal are causing the problems to us. It is not Saturn or Mars that cause the problems. It is, they are indicative of our own past karma's reactions coming to us at a particular time. So it's so now the point is that kala plays a significant role, and during some kala it may be that some negative reactions are coming to us, but that kala may get aggravated because of our actions, and then things can become far worse than what they need to be. So that means, say, we could say the kala factor on one side is associated with purva karma. So it is associated with purva karma. Because of our past actions, we are going to suffer certain things. But if that, now that can, the purva karma, it can minus present karma. That means what? Say, by my past karma, I am going to have a terrible misunderstanding with someone. And two good friends are going to have a misunderstanding by which they are going to quarrel and they are going to fight. But if my present karma is such that I have been responsible, I have been sensitive, I have been respectful, I have been kind, then what will happen is, the result will be, the problem will be lesser. Because my present karma is in one sense subtracting from the past karma. On the other hand, my present karma could add to the past karma. I have a quarrelsome nature, I quarrel with everyone. Whenever problems come, my solution is to outshout the other person. Like some people, they think that if there's an argument, I need to improve the content of my argument. Others think I need to raise the volume of my voice. Or if raising the volumes of my voice doesn't work, I'll start raising my fists. Well, if they start thinking like that, then what will happen is, the result in terms of the problem can worsen. So, the kala will determine that how our present actions should be. I'm not endorsing astrology over here, because each astrologer can have their own idiosyncrasies. But the point is, when some astrologers say this is a bad phase for you, don't make any major decisions in your life, don't invest money, don't do this, don't do that. What is the point over there? The implication behind that is that there can be phases that are bad for us. So during those bad phases, if we are careless, the problems will become worse. Say somebody, by some past karma, they meant to make some road accident. Now if at that time, if they have a habit of driving carefully and they see from the opposite side, somebody just coming swerving, shakily driving, probably that driver is drunk. Then what do? You try to stop your car or move your car out of the way, or stop your car and get out of the car. Now that person may come and hit our car. We may get injured, but we may not get that much injured. But say, imagine that person is drunk and we are also drunk. Then it's going to be a drunken disaster. Isn't it? So it's like drunk square. So it will be a problem raised to the power of 2. So the point I'm making is, kala can affect, when a kala is going, we are going through a particular kala, our own actions will make a significant difference. Not an entire difference, the accident may still happen, but it will make a significant difference. The second point is, with which I'll conclude this, kala and others' actions. So here, this is really the launch point for our discussion tomorrow. In the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna analyzes how he does not control everything. This controllership of Krishna, I'll talk about more in tomorrow's session also. But Krishna used the example in 9.6, Yatha Akasha Sthito Nityam Vayu Sarvatra Go Mahan Tatha Sarvani Bhutani Matsthani Tyupadharaya. So he says that if you consider the sky to be like an upside down bowl, then if the sky is like an upside down bowl, then he says that the wind can move up and down, left and right within the perimeter of the sky, but it cannot move beyond the sky. So like that, we can say each one of us, by our purva karma, we have a particular kshetra. So this we can call as the kshetra. Kshetra is the area of influence. So for everyone, there is a particular kshetra. The kshetra can change with kala also. Somebody may be born in a royal family, but if they are just a prince right now, they have some power. But in future they become king, they have much more power. Isn't it? So for example, say somebody, when they are a child, they may have this much kshetra. When they become, if that person becomes the king, their kshetra may become much bigger. Then afterwards they become old and they are no longer on the throne. Their kshetra again goes down. So the kshetra, the sphere of influence that a person has, can change with time. Now, sometimes, say this is where I am talking about the factor of the person is evil. The person is a terrible person. And now, if somebody else happens to come in their kshetra, say somebody was a Jew who was born in Germany at the time when Hitler was ruling. Now what happens is, they come under the kshetra, under the sphere of influence of Hitler at that time. Now Hitler, by his past karma, was meant to be a powerful king. Now he could have been a powerful ruler, powerful head of state for good or for bad. Now he chose to do it all for a terrible purpose. But he had that option. He got that power, he could have used it for good, he could have used it for bad. Now when he got that power and he used it for bad, that led to other people becoming victimized. Now when the other person is victimized, it is horrible. And at such a time, the intelligent thing to do is not to point out, or intelligent or sensitive thing to do, is not to emphasize, oh, you must have done, all those people must have done some bad karma, because of which they suffered. Well, that is not the relevant factor at that particular point. Nobody tells, for example, Draupadi, that you must have done some bad karma because of which you suffered the humiliation of being disrobed. No. That may be a factor, but that is not the relevant factor. That the relevant factor is, Dushasan did a horrible thing, and Dushasan deserves to be punished. But the point is, while a person has some power, then if we happen to be going through their kshetra, so say we work in a company, and the way things work out is that we come under a particular boss. Maybe we have to work with a particular boss, and that boss is known to be very demanding, very rude, has no respect for boundaries. Anytime the person calls and demands. Now maybe for 6 months we have to work under that boss, and after that we might go into another team, we might go into another project. During those 6 months, that is our kala. We are in the kshetra of that person. And when we are in the kshetra of that person, we have to deal with it. So when here Bhishma will say that I consider this all to be the result of kala. Now kala is also working under the control of the Lord. But what happens in that phase is not necessarily directly caused by God. That kala is coming in our life because of our bad, our past, our misuse of free will, or it is coming because of some evil that someone is doing. So what is coming because of kala, it is not independent of God, but that doesn't mean it is caused by God. So for such kala, we have to accept that bad things happen even to good people. That's why when he is giving all these examples, all these points, that Yudhishthira is so virtuous, you are so powerful, and Krishna is with you. but still bad things happen. So now for most of us, Krishna is not there visibly with us, but the Mahabharata example shows that even when Krishna is directly with some person, still bad things can happen to that person. So the point is, in this world, nobody is immune from bad things happening. And so the question that the scriptures, they ask, the question that we'll be exploring in the next session, that is the question is, why do bad things happen to good people? And that is a valid question, and it can be answered using the philosophy of karma and other things. But this is not the focus of the Bhagavatam. And in general, for most people who are suffering, this is not the most important question. That when bad things happen, what do good people do? When bad things happen, what do good people do? This is a much more constructive question to ask. If somebody is suffering, there's no point at that time in getting into past karma. Not no point, most of the times it's not very helpful. It is, sometimes karma can be an explanation, but the more important thing is, what is the way we can help them right now? I met one devotee in New Zealand, and that devotee is telling that devotee's sister had committed suicide. Now, suicide is a terrible thing. Somebody, that means emotionally they must have been so tormented that they felt death is better than living. But there's a whole thing called a survivor's syndrome or survivor's trauma. That when somebody commits suicide, those who survive them, they face great trauma. Did I do something that pushed this person over the edge? One of my friends is telling me that one day he was just chanting and he had his phone with him, and one of his counselors sent a message, please accept my final obeisances. It's such an alarming thing to get a message like that. What happened? Now, so it is like, from one side, did I do anything that pushed the person over the edge? Or the other is, could I have done something to prevent it? So this is the trauma that the survivors go through. So now at that time, if all that we draw from our philosophy, and we tell whoever has committed suicide has become a ghost. Now it's like we are adding to the trauma of the survivor over there. Isn't it? Now yes, somebody who destroys their body prematurely, then they won't get an next body immediately. And during that intermediate phase, they will have to stay in a disembodied state. And that disembodied state is called a state of being a ghost. But this point is relevant to deter people from committing suicide. Now, if somebody thinks, all my problems I'll end by ending my life. Well, it's not that simple, isn't it? It doesn't work like that. So that is for somebody who may be thinking of that, don't do it. You'll be in a further state of suffering. But for somebody who has lost a loved one, at that time, talking about, they have become a ghost is not very helpful. So at that time, the most important thing is that, I told that, whatever has happened, they are souls, and even for a soul, the Paramatma is with that person. Paramatma doesn't abandon anyone. Paramatma doesn't abandon even ghosts also. The Lord is there, so he said that, now, whatever has happened, you just focus on strengthening your relationship with God, strengthening your relationship with Krishna, practice bhakti, and you heal from that wound. That what has happened It has happened, we can't change it. But what do we do now? How do we move forward? Was it because of our bad action? Did we do something? We don't know. This, how much should we hold ourselves responsible when bad things happen? How much we should see things as beyond our control? Like Prabhupada says in the last sentence of this purport, there is no use. The purport has gone now. There is no use to lament when things are beyond our control. Okay, it won't go back. That when things are beyond human control, there is no use of lamenting. So there are times when trying to analyze, was it my mistake? Was it this person's mistake? That may not be the most helpful thing. So how to function in such situations, we'll be discussing in tomorrow's session. In fact, tomorrow, so today it's not so much some clear directive for action, but it is more appreciating the complexity and the nuance of the situation. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. Basically, our whole analysis was trying to understand Kala as the cause of adversity. What does it mean basically? Because that's what the section was going to talk about. So in that connection, we started by discussing how karma doesn't seem to explain. That they all had done good karma, so it's like it was three factors were there in their favor. They had skill, which is their present karma. They had punya, piety, that was their past karma. And they had God's mercy. So Prabhupada says material and spiritual resources both were there on their side. And still they're suffering. So at such times, it's natural question, why adversity? So karma can seem too simplistic at this time. And in that connection, I discussed how paradoxes, how things are complex. That if we just reduce everything to very simple things, the paradoxes were given to illustrate complexity of reality. That sometimes there are statements in scripture which tell opposite things. So the three things I discussed, the examples of complexity was that happiness and distress are destined, but then still our choices. Sattva can increase happiness, and say tamas or even rajas to some extent can increase distress. So that is also true. So like that we discussed multiple fixed lifespan versus Ayurveda, and then Maya Adhyakshin Prakriti versus Nadatte Kasyachit Papam. So God controls everything and God does not control everything. So our whole point was we can't just take one statement from scripture and absolutize it. So for all suffering, it's your own karma. We can't take that kind of oversimplified approach. So when problems come, we discuss problems can broadly, it is ultimately nothing happens without God's will. But as God's will, there is free will, and then there is evil. And we need to consider which is the relevant factor when for understanding what's happening. So based on, then I talked about, finally with this and a whole analysis, we talked about Kala. Kala means that when we are going through a bad phase, that bad phase could be because of our own past karma, that our destiny may come upon us, and then how we act can either alleviate means minimize the effect, or aggravate. And then the bad phase can come also because of, so here when you are talking about the bad phase, this is largely free will. It is up to us to how do we face the bad phase. But then the bad phase can also come because of evil. Evil means others' actions. So others kshetra, we are temporarily passing through that kshetra. And when we are passing through that kshetra, at that time, during that phase, we may have to suffer. So the focus needs to be on not why this happened, but what to do. How do, when bad things happen to good people, what do good people do? So what does Bhishma recommend Yudhishthir to do? That we'll be discussing in tomorrow's session. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So are there any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu. So I'm afraid many of the questions may have to be answered. We will have to wait for the answers tomorrow. But you can ask the question, but be ready to wait for the answer tomorrow, because I'm not going to give tomorrow's class today.
Okay, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for this divine lecture. So as you told that if we come in contact with an evil person under their circle of influence, that can aggravate our bad karma. So
I don't think it aggravates our bad karma. It aggravates our bad situation.
Okay, yes.
Not our bad karma. Unless we associate with them and we also become evil. That's a different situation.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So in case of Jews, they had no choice actually. If we see at a bigger perspective, so what's their fault in that case? That they had to come in contact with a person like Hitler.
Well, see, if you want to take a purely rational perspective, yes, why does one person come under the kshetra of another person? That is by karma. Say somebody is born at a time when a very good king is ruling. Why is that? That's because of good karma. Somebody is born at a time when a tyrant, a dictator is ruling. That's because of bad karma. So this is just a fact of life. But what I was saying is that may not be the most relevant explanation at that time. We don't focus on that, because where should the focus be in such a way that we can help someone? Our attitude should be at most of the times should be focused on helping the other person. So when somebody is suffering, somebody has gone through terrible suffering, we need to focus on how can I help that person. If we only focus on their own karma, if we don't, basically philosophy without service attitude will make us hard-hearted. Because say consider, if everybody suffers because of their past karma. That is true. But if I take this and I don't have a service attitude, then where am I going to stop? Say for example, a mother has a newborn baby and the newborn baby is crying. Now, should the mother think this baby is crying because of her own past karma? No. The mother should have a service attitude, isn't it? It is her mother's duty itself. I have to take care of my child. Now sometimes, in spite of the best care taken by the mother, still the baby may have some disease because of the baby keeps crying. Now that we can say is because of, that's beyond our control. That's past karma. So philosophy without service attitude can make us hard-hearted and it can make us terribly irresponsible. If we are robbed, some thieves come into our house and rob everything from us, and we go to the police, and the police say it was your own past karma, isn't it, because you were robbed? Well, yeah, no, well, that may be my past karma, but right now the question is, what is your present dharma? Isn't it? So your present dharma is you are taking a salary, and that is to maintain law and order over here. So your present dharma is what is important. If a husband doesn't take responsibility for family, doesn't have a job, and doesn't earn money, and the wife says, we are living in great difficulty. He says, it is your own karma. No, it is your dharma. Or consider the opposite. If the wife doesn't cook food very well, and the husband comes back home after a hard day's work, and he says, where is the food? The chapati is not cooked properly. It's your own karma. No, it's your dharma that is important over there. Isn't it? So, that's the point. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for this detailed lecture, wonderful class. Prabhuji, as you explained that how Kal acts in our life or how Kal works, but as we also have heard from the scriptures that Kal acts differently in case of devotees and non-devotees. So I want to ask that how it acts differently, what is the difference? How Kal...
That Krishna's role will be discussed about tomorrow. Kal itself doesn't act differently. Kal acts symmetrically, but Krishna gives us strength to respond to Kala differently. See, if you consider Kala as a material factor, see, there is always the relationship of Bheda and Abheda, difference and non-difference. So if we consider Kala as, say, the changing of seasons. Now if it is very hot, it is going to be hot for devotees, it is going to be hot for non-devotees also. Isn't it? The summer heat is not going to act differently for devotees and non-devotees. But somebody who is extremely in bodily consciousness, they will feel tormented by it. Now devotees who are not so much in bodily consciousness will still be inconvenienced by it. But maybe they are not so troubled by it. So it's not so much Kala acts differently, it's more that the way we respond to it is different. Can Kala act different? That's also possible. But we don't have to expect or insist or demand that it act differently. The focus is more on that we respond differently. Okay? Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. There are two things when I heard from you. There are two things coming to my mind. One is like you said there are three things. One is the God's wills, one's own free will, and others' will. Like then there are two things happen. Like one is that in our life, by our free will we can do good or bad. Similarly, others' will, they can also try the same thing. So that creates a situation in our life. But then sometimes that is what we are suffering or enjoying by that process. But when we see the Mahabharata where Pandavas, Kauravas are there and Lord Krishna was also there, and we say it is being orchestrated by Krishna's Leela, that the way people behave was designed by Krishna. So my point is, how do we jump from one set of things happening like our will and others' will versus something totally happening by God's will? How do we jump from one to other?
So that's what I talked about, the four levels at which scripture can be understood. So there is the ethical level and there's a devotional level. See, I don't think we can jump from one to another. It's like we take two different perspectives. If you want to focus on the devotional perspective, focus on the devotional perspective. And then yes, it's all arranged by the Lord and we relish it as the Lord's pastime. But if you want to look at it from the ethical perspective, then focus on the ethical perspective. And then if we suddenly jump from at one moment we are talking about the ethical and the next moment we jump to the devotional, that doesn't work. It's like, say, if we are an authority figure and if somebody has not done their service properly and we chastise that person left and right, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, and that same person comes and tells, okay, I wanted to do this service but this person was supposed to help and this person didn't help, and at that time we say, no, see it as Krishna's arrangement. No, that means when I make a mistake, you blame me for it. But when somebody else has made a mistake, you say, see it as Krishna's arrangement. That is being inconsistent. Now, we may say that that person has that particular nature and that person is working on improving it, but they keep making mistakes like this. But if we simply start using philosophy selectively, then people feel, they may not immediately realize it, but they will feel uncomfortable, they will get alienated. So we have to be consistent. So yes, should we try to see things from the perspective of Krishna's hand? Of course. But does that mean that we don't look at immediate factors? No. When Prabhupada was trying to get the Juhu temple, and this Mr. N was opposing it, did Prabhupada say, oh, it's all Krishna's arrangement, if Krishna doesn't want this temple to come to us, what can we do? No, Prabhupada focused on the practical level, ethical level. He said that we have given the money, this person is supposed to give us the land. Either Prabhupada said, either you give us our money back and take the land deal, or you give us the full land deed and we take the full money from us. You are taking the money from us and then driving us away. That's not ethically right. So if we start jumping from one to another, there has to be a proper reason and explanation for that. Otherwise it can just come off as very self-serving. So when you make a mistake, it's your punishment. It's your problem. When I make a mistake, it is Krishna's plan for your purification. No. That would work properly. So that now, can we look at things from a practical perspective? Yes, we can. Because the scriptures themselves do this. If you read the Mahabharata, nowhere in the Mahabharata does Krishna say, you do this because it is my instruction to you. Krishna reasons. So when Krishna tells Bhima to hit Duryodhan below the thigh, or below the waist, on the thigh. No. After that, Balram and even the Devatas, they get angry. Or Devatas protest basically. Balram gets angry. Now Krishna doesn't say, I am God, how dare you question my will. Krishna makes a reasoning based on the context over there. So is the ethical reasoning the only approach to look at these pastimes? No. But is the ethical reasoning approach completely inapplicable? Well, if they say it's completely inapplicable, then there will be nothing for us to learn in that through any of the scriptural pastimes. My understanding is Prabhupada takes the devotional approach, Prabhupada also takes the ethical approach. So, even with respect to Prabhupada's pastimes, now can we say all of Prabhupada's extraordinary outreach and success was arranged by the Lord? Yes, it is true. But does that not mean that we can't learn something from Prabhupada? When Prabhupada was trying so vigorously to share bhakti in India, it was not working. Prabhupada didn't just passively say, okay, accept it as Krishna's will. Prabhupada did something revolutionary, radical, courageous. He said, I'll go to America and I will try to make American people devotees. Now why? Because Prabhupada said Indians are attracted by infatuated with the West. What does that mean? Indians are infatuated with the white skin basically. So now Indians being infatuated by the white skin is Maya, isn't it? But Prabhupada used one brand of Maya to counter another brand of Maya. Isn't it? So one brand of Maya is what? That, this whole Krishna, this whole Bhakti, this whole Bhagavad Gita, it is all old fashioned, it is irrelevant for us today. Another brand of Maya is, the white skinned people are so intelligent, they are so expert, they are so successful. Now, Prabhupada just directly tried to counter, tell and explain how the Bhagavad Gita is relevant, but people are not ready to take it. So Prabhupada went to the West. So now, the point I am making is that can we not analyze like this that, okay, Prabhupada tried at one level, when it didn't work, he didn't take it as simple as Krishna's will. He analyzed and he arrived at a particular decision. And then he focused on applying that strategy. So the ethical approach can also be used, the transcendental approach can also be used. But your point is well taken, that when we are dealing with sacred characters, our focus should not be so much on who is right, because we don't want to be judging great characters. Our focus should be more on what is right. So if you see in the Chitraketu pastime, for example, when Chitraketu laughs on seeing Parvati sitting on the lap of Lord Shiva. So at that time, sometimes Prabhupada takes Parvati perspective and says in the Chitraketu, when he saw that there were great sages sitting over there, none of them was objecting, why did he have to object to that? But then afterwards, when Chitraketu very gracefully accepts the curse, and then Narayana Parasarve, that verse comes about how a devotee is equipoised. At that time, Prabhupada takes from the perspective of, in favor of Chitraketu, he says that when Chitraketu laughed, Lord Shiva was not disturbed, the sages were not disturbed. So why did Parvati have to become so angry? So was the cursing wrong? Was the laughing wrong? The point is that our focus is not so much on whether this particular action was wrong or right. Our focus is more on that what we can learn about right and wrong action from that situation. Okay? Thank you very much. One last question we'll have. Okay, there are a lot of questions. One last question we'll take here.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for such a wonderful class. Prabhuji, my question is, you explained, like in the example of Draupadi's disrobing, there were three factors, Yudhishthira's free will, Duryodhana's free will, and Krishna's will in the form of permission that he allowed. So Prabhuji, can we understand some example where Krishna's permission was not there, and then what happened? I mean, that incident happened or it didn't happen?
See, Krishna's intention may not be there, but without Krishna's permission, nothing can happen. Like, for example, when Krishna went as a Shanti Dut, as a peace messenger, Duryodhana rejected his peace proposal. So Krishna's desire was that the war be avoided. But Duryodhana was just so adamant that he just didn't listen. So, can things happen against God's will? Well, it depends. The will, when we use the word will can mean God's intention. So can people do things which God doesn't want them to do? Of course they can. But can people do things which is against God's permission? No. That nobody can do. So without that permission is like the sky. Say for example, right now, you can get angry, I can get angry. Maybe if I get angry, I may yell at someone. If you get angry, maybe you can yell at someone, you can hit someone. But our anger cannot destroy a whole city. Right? But the President of America or the President of Russia, they get angry, they can press one button and the entire city can be nuked. So that is the kshetra they have right now. So now why do they have that level of influence? That is by Krishna's will. And there is a kala when they will have it. They'll have it for a tenure, sometimes 5 years, 10 years, sometimes a particular head of state might be there for 20, 30, 50 years. But eventually that kala is going to end. So nothing happens without Krishna's permission. Okay. So thank you very much. Granthraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki.
We are very, very thankful to Chaitanya and Prabhuji for actually getting us deeper and understanding more topics which we face on day-to-day basis, these challenges, these sufferings, and sometimes we end up thinking, did I do something wrong, or he is to be blamed, or God is to be blamed. But here today we understand that it's like it is influenced by many different factors. And then what important point Prabhuji highlighted is we have to understand that what we can do moving forward. Not so much on why it happened, but now when I am in this particular situation, what am I supposed to do? And that what I am supposed to do will come tomorrow. So we request all of you to please come tomorrow, and request others who are listening online to please also try to join here in person. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhuji ki. So we'll thank Prabhuji by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhuji ki. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.